Leading in a time of crisis, what makes a leader is going to be our discussion for the next 18 minutes, a very timely one indeed. And let's dive right into it, Victoria. When we're talking about crisis, unfortunately, your country has found itself in a crisis beyond words since February 24th, the unjustified aggression of Russia against your own country, against Ukraine. Obviously, your life has changed, the lives of your country has changed. How do you lead through a crisis such as a war? What are the main obstacles here? How to be an entrepreneur in such difficult circumstances and in such a difficult environment?
Okay, as an entrepreneur and CEO with more than 200 people stationed and working in the heart of the war, Kiev, of course, I lead my business in a different way. First of all, number one key principle today for BetterMe is prioritize the safety of my team and their families. There is no plans, maybe IPO, margin, or etc. Number one priority today is safety. Second, it's maybe meet fear in its face. We create all worst case scenario to protect our company from total system breakdown. And number third, as me as a CEO, maybe it's like number one priority for today, keep your energy high by healthy nutrition, daily workouts, and mindfulness practice like deep breathing or guided meditation. Because during a crisis, our brains typically use sugar, alcohol, or drugs to cope with fear and stress. And the problem is that it gives only short-term results with long-term negative consequence. Stress inhibits you from seeing situation in clarity. And as a CEO, manifesting energy and solution is the top priority.
Yeah, main task for a CEO under any given circumstances, let alone the one you find yourself in. BetterMe, of course, leading Ukraine-based healthcare company with over 100 million users worldwide. Victoria, I'm going to come to you again in just a moment. Let me bring in Marcelo here, a local hero, if you will. International brand, of course, Remote, which simplifies how companies hire global talent from anywhere. Marcelo, leading in a time of crisis. Certainly, we've had the pandemic. Was that a blessing in disguise for somebody who advocates and works on how companies hire global talent from anywhere remotely? Is that something that worked in your favor even?
Yes, but it served the world a very good purpose. Indeed, the remote work used to be perceived as sort of a flexibility and option, but today we see it as a real mainstream option rather than just a flexibility, because it not only allows people to lead different lives, but people that are in the middle of a crisis situation, in companies that have access to all the talent in the world, and so you bring opportunities and talent together as well, and this bridges a very important gap because talent is everywhere, opportunities are not. And so it brings, a better quality of life to a lot of people across the world.
Yeah, across the world for sure. That's where you come in, obviously. Marcelo, I'll revert to you in just a moment. Let me bring in Mada here, co-founder and VP of Branch, of course, the mobile linking platform for top brands such as Airbnb, Adobe, BuzzFeed, and many, many more. Mada, Branch certainly a success story, but you've been in Silicon Valley for many, many years. You stem originally from Romania, certainly had your ups and downs, had to overcome some obstacles. Give us a sense of your path throughout the past couple of decades here.
Oh, my personal path, it's interesting. Well, the biggest obstacle I had to actually go after were around immigration. My visa got denied once due to a clerical error. My green card got denied the first time. So I think for me personally, figuring out how to really navigate uncertainty and not really knowing where will I be. I think the way I dealt with it is very similar to what Victoria is saying about how you deal with a crisis in a business and the way we think about branch of a potential crisis. And it really is around trying to plan scenarios and having a backup for the backup for the backup. So in my case, I was like, well, if I can stay in the States, this is what I will do. And I had a backup plan. And if that plan didn't work, I had another backup plan. And I think it's very important when you are in a business to plan for the best, but also have a backup plan for the worst. So, and I go with that in both that helps me take a lot more risks because I know that even if things go really wrong, I have a plan for it. And I think it's how we've really thought about planning in the business as well as we've grown over the past 8 years.
Yeah, and you certainly are a wonderful example of how immigration, of how migrants are coming to another country and adding value to their new country that they live in this case, the United States, of course. Victoria, resilience is a word that we hear a lot, resilience and courage in the context of Ukraine, the Ukrainian people. We have an unusual amount of, a disproportionate amount of big number of Ukrainian startups here. It's wonderful to see. Certainly it speaks for and to the resilience of your people in these times, doesn't it?
Of course. Thank you for this question. I'm waiting for it because if I talk about Ukraine, I can see it. So I would like tell you more about the tech people. Ukraine have more graduates in tech today than any other European countries. 240,000 people today employed in the technology, and this number will double to the 2024. And second, it's maybe more interesting part that technology sector of Ukraine is one of the most resilient as we get our revenue globally. For example, BetterMe have more than 70% of our revenue from the United States and 30% of the latest is Europe and Latin America. And other stuff, if we talk about Ukrainian tech after the war, I see that Kyiv can all opportunity to be the next Silicon Valley after the war because we have all opportunity from one side, a lot of great techy, intelligent people, and from other side, we have really brave, resilient entrepreneurs. So, and if we talk about BetterMe, we will continue to grow and represent our country with a pride.
Well, you certainly you're certainly a shining example of that resilience, courage, and leadership from your country. Kiev is going to be a hotspot, you say. Perhaps we'll have the next Web Summit in Kiev. I don't know about that, but we'll talk about that backstage. Marcelo, at the end of the day, we're here. You all three are role models. You are leaders. You are success stories. You found yourself in the spotlight. But of course, there's crises you have to go through on a daily basis, sometimes maybe tragedy. What is the single biggest lesson that you have learned on your trajectory upwards? Certainly a lot of failures or obstacles along the ways. Many in the audience trying to get to where you are. What is the main lesson you can convey here?
So to give a bit of context, Remote was founded January 2019. We went through the first pandemic, COVID. Then we started with a war, and we're going through an economical crisis as well. And a lot of this creates turmoil, it creates tragedies, terror, and you will have to make all the decisions in a split second. Some will be easy, some will be hard, but you can always be kind. Doesn't matter, what kind of message you're delivering, who's going to be affected, or impacted positively, but you should never fail to be kind. That to me, you always have an option, no matter what is in front of you. And being kind is today, as we evolve as a species, something that we should not forget at all.
Being kind, I think that's a message that everybody here rightfully can rally behind, and certainly you embody this message also through your style of leadership on a daily basis. Mada, if we're talking about the ups and downs that I think every entrepreneur has to go through, there's just no alternative. Even somebody like Brad, who is just here speaking on behalf of Microsoft, for him to get here, I'm sure that would have been another talk. For him. What are some of the main lessons, perhaps the biggest single lessons that you have acquired over the past 2 decades on your way to success?
Maybe I'll actually do 2. The first one is, I was talking about this with someone earlier, this idea of having a growth mindset. I grew up in Romania during communism, and I don't think the growth mindset was there. I think there was this idea that you are born in a certain way and you're good at some things and you're not necessarily good at some things. And when you have a fixed view of yourself, it's very hard to take feedback. And in the early days of my startup, when people would give me feedback, I would take it extremely personally. And I had a very hard time changing and evolving. And I ended up reading this book called Mindset, and it really changed my life. I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is how my co-founders think. I would give them feedback, and they think about it as an input that can make them better. And I actually make sure that every branch employee who starts gets that book, because if you grew up in a growth mindset, it's very easy. You get it, you're like, oh, this book, I know it. But if you haven't, I think it can really help you understand our culture better. And the second is really around grit. I think if you think of failure as just a step in your growth and just one way that you can keep learning and getting better, I'm extremely confident that everyone in this room can succeed of whatever you put your mind to. Some of you will succeed earlier because you'll get lucky and maybe your idea will be good. And some of you might take you 3-4 times. Branch was our 4th idea as a founding team. It took us 2 years to get to it. But we just had the grit to keep going. So the biggest learning is, to have the grit and to really take your failures and learn from them and grow.
Grit is certainly an ingredient that is indispensable in this environment, in any environment, for that.
But especially in this one.
In this one, leading in a time of crisis. What makes a leader, Victoria, is a question we're trying to answer here. Some of it is innate, some of it you are probably born with, and some you have to acquire. Which ones apply in your particular case? Which one did you have to acquire afterwards by observing other leaders, by reading books, by listening to mentors? Which ones were those?
After the war, maybe number 1, it's just focus on your mission and allow the universe to co-create your vision, because plan, it's nothing. Only important is your team. BetterMe is the best team ever. I'm so proud of my team. I know that a lot of them now in Kiev see me. You're the best. And the most important part in any business is people, and it's number 1. It doesn't matter what can.
Without a good team, without a doubt, Marcelo, that's something you can, I'm sure, sign on the dot in a second. Without a good team, even the greatest vision is worthless. But still, the question of, you are a leader, clearly, some of it you had to probably learn throughout the process. What made you a good leader? What made you a great leader throughout the process?
I think that as you grow in a company and leading people, my ultimate lesson as a leader was that ego plays no good part in it. When you show up to work every day, people look up to you, for direction, and they're going to amplify whatever you put out. If it's good, they're going to put out good things. If it's bad, they're going to scale that. And if you bring your ego, then you're priming no one but yourself. And so at the end of the day, everyone will do better. As if a leader, you focus on the mission ahead and the execution and well-being of people. Ego stays home.
Mada, you are based in Silicon Valley, picking up on where Marcelo left off, kindness, empathy, being a team leader. If you don't possess these, do you know examples of people who've made it despite lacking these? You don't have to name names here, but at the end of the day, are these indispensable, the ingredients and the talents that we're talking about to making a great leader, of rallying troops?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's very interesting. I want to write a book called Startup Monsters, about the monsters you have to face to start a company. And actually, the first monster I'm working on is ego, because I do think there are people who made it, but I don't. It's like up to what point? At some point, ego will. It will be very hard to actually be a good leader if you have it and if you don't let go on it. And I actually think feedback and looking at yourself in the mirror and acknowledging it is one of the tools to deal with your ego. And I think that's really interesting. I think the main one for me is really this idea that empowering others is extremely important. When you are a founder and entrepreneur, you're used to doing everything yourself, and you love doing things. So as your company grows, the biggest challenge I've seen in myself, my co-founders, and others is really this idea that now others need to do the work, and you just provide the vision. And that can be a hard change to adapt to as your company grows. But the leaders who do this well and empower others to do the work and are okay stepping back and just setting the vision are the leaders who continue to lead their companies as they grow.
As this great session is slowly winding down, perhaps get a very short answer from all of you, a few seconds each. Victoria, what is the number one thing you wish you would have known before starting out this app, embarking on this journey? The number one thing that you would have liked to know before, and something that perhaps this audience can take with them.
Business, it's emotional soul game. So number one, it's about mental stability, act and not react. Because time you spend in negative reaction, you can spend on positive action to grow your business.
Marcelo, now you're sitting on a stage and you are the one telling other people or advising them on how to get to where you are. What is the number one thing you would have liked to hear?
Many years ago, something that I learned today is that anxiety is either a superpower or a super problem. As a founder, as a leader, you're always going to be faced with this. And it's up to you, really.
Mada?
It's okay to focus on yourself. I think I felt very guilty. I felt I always had to put the company first. And if you don't put yourself first, it will be hard to actually be the right leader to lead your company.
It's great talk with three leaders who value and exercise that leadership on a daily basis. Victoria, Marcelo, Mada, thank you so much for this talk. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.